everybody. Welcome to Life Stories. I'm so glad that you're here. Today on the podcast, I speak with Norma Norris, who began a nonprofit called Reality Tour. This is a drug prevention program, and they are doing a powerful work. It is very hands-on, it's powerful, and it's serious, but it's helpful. It's very helpful to families. And as I bring up the word of the week,
It's the word of the week.
the word of the week this week is community. One of the things that impressed me about this nonprofit was that this is not something that Norma went through in her family. This was not something that she had to deal with. And so she decided to create this nonprofit. She talked about how it wasn't just about her, it was about her community, that she was going to live in this community and she wanted to help everybody. It reminded me that, I've talked about my faith many times. And when I pray for my grandkids and for their school and for their safety, I don't want my grandkids to just be safe. I want everybody in that building to be safe. And so I understood what she meant about preparing things for the entire community. You want everybody, you want other people's kids to be taken care of. You don't want just your own. This is a place where you live and the people that you do life with. And so I totally understood where she was coming from, why she had a heart for her community. So I want you to think about your community. What can you do, even a small thing, to help and to prepare and to offer assistance in any way that you can for not just your family, but for the people around you. I hope you enjoy our conversation today. It is powerful. If you've got kids, if you've got teenagers, especially, you need to listen. It was great talking to her and hearing about what she's doing. So thanks for listening. Have a great day. Hi,
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Oh, well, I'm pleased to do that. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. There are incredible people doing incredible things all over. And I'm looking for unique nonprofits and charities and, ministries. Yours stood out to me. I haven't seen another one like what you're doing. So that's why I reached out to you for Pennsylvania because I
Well,
love,
thank you.
yeah, I love what you're doing. I love all these, very unique, creative ideas that people are taking and just helping everybody around them. One of the things that surprised me, it impressed me, but it surprised me, a lot of the people that I've talked to have started nonprofits because of something that they went through or their family went through that they didn't want to go through again. And this was not something that affected you directly. This was, I know you talked to
Right.
your son, but this wasn't something that you went through in your family so that impressed me that you would take this on and even though it didn't affect you directly.
Community that you want to retire in.
Right.
And even though my children were grown, there's the grandchildren and,
Right.
so that concern about community and safety and vibrancy for everyone to reach their full potential really has a very long life.
Right. That's true. So I've watched your video and I've read about, how the nonprofit got started, but will you explain to me why you began this program, the reality tour, and um, where the idea came from and why you wanted to start it?
Oh, yes. So you have to go back, really like 21 years. And heroin was just hitting the streets of Butler, Pennsylvania, where I live, which is 30 miles north of Steeler country.
Hey.
And we hadn't seen anything like this on our streets. This was something you've heard about happening in big cities. And it was just very hard to wrap your head around that young people were dying from heroin overdoses. And so I began to attend community meetings. And what really hit home was I was getting ready for work and listening to our morning DJ interview our district attorney at the time. It was District Attorney Tim McCune. He's now a judge in Butler County. But they were talking about the heroin problem. And he said something that just really floored me. And he said that our high school students were beginning to experiment with it.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, with the headlines, with people overdosing on it, why would our children want to experiment with something like that?
Right.
So I began to do my own research in the community and really try to figure out what was going on. Are we truly at a shift in our environment? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it turns out we truly were, but it was still at that assessment level at that time.
Right.
And a lot of people felt that, it didn't affect them, not my kid. My kid would never do heroin. Okay.
Right.
Because it was just so far removed from the possibilities that had ever gone before. So I interviewed law enforcement and people that were providing community services. I interviewed parents. I interviewed people who were in recovery. And I interviewed my own son, who had just graduated from high school, was away at college, came back for Thanksgiving vacation. And I asked him, I said, just how bad was the drug use in high school?
Mm-hmm.
And he was very quiet. And then he named his best friend since private school days.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, Mom, he's a heroin addict.
Oh, wow.
And I looked at my child and I said, how did you come so close
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't get caught up in this? And then he said something that would never let me go.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I could always see beyond the next 10 minutes.
I loved that when I listened to that video. I
Mm-hmm.
loved that because that's just so profound, not just for a high school student, a college student, for anybody to be able to do that. That was
Yes.
amazing to me.
I couldn't let go of that phrase because it reduced it to its lowest common denominator
Mm-hmm.
in terms of everyone should be able to see beyond the next 10 minutes.
Right.
But they wouldn't prioritize that in this area if they didn't understand the risks.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a whole new level of education that had to address the risks. And that's not very popular in our society.
Right. You're right.
Yeah. So I began to look at if youth knew the ultimate consequences and the outcome,
Mm-hmm.
then perhaps they could make better choices and could see beyond the next 10 minutes. And parents needed to understand, to see beyond the next 10 minutes, to realize this was real and present in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And your children could have access.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began to look at those two elements and put together a way that I thought would help people do just that.
Yeah.
And so I came up with a program that had the consequences, gave you the coping skills, and then had first person accounts from law enforcement and people in recovery, so that you're not just up there preaching and preaching and preaching and hearing from one voice.
Right.
And my plan was to host this 3 times over the summer of 2003.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't expect was that we would develop a 2-month waiting list to get in right away.
Yeah.
And beyond that, surrounding communities in the Pittsburgh area heard about it, and people started coming from outside our community and adding more pressure to that wait list.
Mm.
And professionals came, psychiatrists came, heads of other nonprofits came, law enforcement came, and people wanted the program model for reality tour. And I'm like, whatever that is. So to make a long story short, I quit my job in radio. After explaining that to my husband, who had retired from a steel mill, and I had promised I'd work for 5 more years. So, but he's a good guy. And started a nonprofit and began to truly understand what nonprofit means. It means
Hmm.
always looking for the dollars.
Right.
But it was about the mission more than anything.
Yeah.
And so I took prevention specialist training through the Pennsylvania Department of Health so that I had the credentials to proceed with this venture. Um, and then one of the next things I did as executive director of our nonprofit, which I named Candle in all caps. I
Uh-huh.
wouldn't do this again
Oh,
because
yeah.
people don't understand the acronyms anymore. And but it stands for Community Action Network for Drug-Free Lifestyle Empowerment Incorporated.
Okay.
I always felt that we were an umbrella that could possibly do more than reality tour. So I
Okay.
didn't want to name it that. So that is the
Okay.
name of our 501c3 nonprofit. And I developed the program model. So it's almost like a franchise.
Uh-huh.
In fact, it is exactly like a franchise,
Hmm.
except you're not going to be making Subway sandwiches. You're
Right.
going to be doing drug prevention, but it is in a very prescribed recipe, if you
Yeah.
will. So the first part of our program are what we call the dramatic scenes
Hmm.
that take you in the walk and in the life and death of a teen who chose to use drugs.
Wow.
And the scenes are narrated
Hmm.
so that you really have an emotional involvement. It's kind of like going to the movies where, like, you see Titanic, you know what's going to happen, but right before it happens, you're still hoping somehow
Right.
this movie turns out different. So you have that
Yeah.
high social emotional learnings is what they call it now. I didn't know
Yeah.
that at the time. So the scenes are very briefly enacted to show um, arrest, imprisonment, the overdose ER scene, and a funeral scene. And it really travels through like more of the day-to-day life of the teen afflicted to
Right.
show that this person didn't set out in life to become addicted to drugs and to die early. They
Right.
didn't they didn't choose that as a path.
Yeah.
It's subtle choices along the way
Hmm.
that youth who are young as 10 in our audience, along with their parent or caregiver, they can understand this progression. It starts out talking about how, the youth afflicted made small bad choices in the beginning that led to bigger bad choices. But in the
Right.
meantime, he used to play soccer with his little brother and, was normal, so to speak. And it progresses on to the emergency scene and the choice um, uh, to use drugs, and that it's the teen talking in his unconscious state.
Yeah.
What's happening to me? People were all over me, tubes and needles. And it's only like about a 30-second
Wow.
narration. And then the scene opens and there are emergency workers, and the real impetus to the scene is when the parents burst into the emergency room
Mm.
and their child has expired. And then we have a funeral scene again, which is narrated by the afflicted teen, and really stating that once I was just like you,
Yeah.
but these are the choices I made. This is what people will talk about
Hmm.
because it is very, very visual.
Yes.
It's only 20 minutes of a 2-hour program, but people are standing in the scenes. This is not something that's presented in a theater environment or an
Right.
auditorium. You are standing, and you actually, in the emergency room scene, people have to part so that the parents
Oh,
can come in. So, yes, this is powerful.
yeah.
It is what is happening in too many families.
Right.
You wish you didn't have to portray that,
Yeah.
but to be honest with our children and interpret today's environment,
Yeah.
you do need to portray that because it affects the choices that they make. And then we go into the coping skills segment. And this is where we talk about national statistics and local statistics for substance misuse, the most popular substances that youth are using. And sometimes that's surprising to parents.
Mm-hmm.
But in between those informational slides, and there's about 6 of them that deal with the absolute trends: vaping, fentanyl, marijuana, certainly alcohol. But in between those, we have like almost a cheer and a chant that says, most kids you don't use drugs, I don't. So it's like a reaffirmation of their pledge.
Right.
Reminding them that they're still in a safe environment because of the choices that they're going to make, and because their parents are also going to help them along the way.
Right.
And we isolate in those coping skills the responsibilities of youth and the responsibilities of parents in that process. And at times people are on their feet and they're laughing.
Wow.
So that really changes the environment and shows that prevention, while serious and presenting the true consequences, can still involve community.
Right.
And have that reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And then we conclude with an interview of a law enforcement officer and someone in recovery, so that you're hearing what is really happening in your locale. We have a lot of the schools bring in recovery speakers, and it is a powerful element. We try to really focus on first steps to take. And one of those is, and we just developed this parent-child prevention activity card.
Okay.
And it's a parent checklist. So these are parent promises, and it's meant to be a sit-down segment with your child. So I promise to be my child's most powerful prevention tool, which parents and caregivers are.
Right.
And I will share a code word with you to use so that you can drop this code word to let me know if you were ever in an unsafe situation. So it goes on that checklist. And then on the back, as you're continuing this conversation, the parent traces this larger handprint as their promise to always be there for their child.
Wow.
The child traces the smaller handprint to give the parent their drug-free promise.
That's great.
And this can occur at a very early age without even dealing with necessarily the ultimate consequences, but don't take any substances. If somebody offers you a pill or says, try this flavor of my vape, a child needs to know what their first reaction should be. And unless you actually cover that situation, they're going to be caught unaware.
Right.
And they'll look at their peer for cues. But if the parent has already given them their first course of action, then they know, oh, I know what to do in this situation. Right. So if the child is staying overnight at a friend's house and, they're going to maybe get into the parent's alcohol, and we'll just try a little bit of this. And so that child knows to call home, drop that code word into the conversation. And the parent knows to come get them. Without asking any questions on the phone call. Just remove them from the situation. So we're very much focused on the forefront of decision making and empowering children to know that they have that, they're equipped to make the right decision because they've been coached, if you will, in order to do that. And sometimes that's not something a parent thinks about. I mean, you even have to do this with things like pornography, telling your child, if you ever come across this, you are to remove yourself.
Right.
So we often forget, we hope it's not going to happen.
Right. We assume sometimes it's not.
Right. They're young, they're innocent.
Yeah.
And with social media today, you really have to.
Yeah.
You have to prepare your child. But getting back to the elements of reality tour, I hope, Sherry, you can see how those three components really relate to any community.
Yeah.
Because the consequences are fictional and general in nature of what could happen.
Yeah.
The coping skills get into the specifics
Mm-hmm.
of the availability of drugs, even getting into Snapchat and how it can deliver drugs to your door.
Wow.
And there's emojis to identify that you're a drug dealer.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, there's like an electrical plug. And if that is by your profile, you will deliver drugs, or you're interested in buying drugs, or there's no reason for any child to have Snapchat or
Right.
TikTok for that
I
matter.
agree. I agree.
I've had parents tell me, yes, but there's parental controls and the parent cannot navigate through the controls themselves, which means the child can negate those
Yeah.
at any time. So the consequences stay the same. The components in the middle that are the coping skills, those are updated every year.
Okay.
You don't have drug prevention programs that are updated every year.
Right.
You'll have a vaping program,
Yeah.
or an alcohol prevention program, or fentanyl related program, but
Right.
it's all the same.
Yeah.
Making poor choices and wanting to alter your sense of
Yeah.
reality.
Well, one thing I was going to ask was about the recovery interview. Is that always just with law enforcement, or is it somebody that's actually in recovery, or how does that work?
It's two separate interviews. So
Okay.
local law enforcement can tell you what's going on in the community
Uh-huh.
that parents should be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And law enforcement doesn't get much of a chance to tell people what they want them to know in advance.
Right.
So this is that opportunity.
Yeah.
Where maybe they're seeing a lot of meth, or this is new, or we just encountered this and the kids that we picked up were 12 and 13 years old, or something of interest like that. So that there's a snapshot of the community and the real risks that are present.
Yeah.
The next interview, the last interview with the recovery spokesperson, is someone who is in recovery.
Okay.
We want to leave those in the audience who have members of their family who are impacted with hope.
Right.
And we also want to peel back the layers that the myth around partying being okay
Yeah.
and just a matter of rite of passage, if you will,
Right.
is really a lie, that it can lead to so many other things.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a prescribed series of questions to ask the recovery spokesperson so that we're drawing out similar information no matter what community this is being presented in. And that goes back to our evidence-based program, where we're keying on, really key questions for this age appropriate audience.
Yeah. And that was another question I was going to ask, was how young have you had kids come in with their parents? Like what age?
We say that you have to be 10 years old
Okay.
in order to attend reality tour.
Yeah.
And, we want the information to be relevant and to be able to be understood
Yeah.
in its context.
Right. That it sounds very young, but I have a granddaughter who's 9, and to think about her being exposed to anything, um, to know about any of this, I want her to be innocent and clueless. But it's not reality. It's not, it's just scary.
If your children are riding a bus with other children, especially in upper grades,
Mm-hmm.
there is no reason to hold back this information because
Oh,
they are
absolutely.
going to hear about it,
Yep.
perhaps even see vaping particularly going on. And maybe they'll talk to you about it,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe they won't. And there's a perception of normalcy if it's kids on the bus telling you
Yeah.
about it. So we are really in a tough spot as
Yeah.
parents and grandparents.
I agree. I think about kids who have older siblings. And, if my granddaughter was to get something from a friend, and she wouldn't know, she wouldn't just do something crazy. She's very much a rule
Mm-hmm.
follower and wants to do right. But if she got it from her friend who got it from their older sibling who
Right.
acted like it was not a big deal, it's that simple. It could be that simple, which is so scary. It's just
It is.
scary.
I mean, when I think back to my childhood and, spending overnights and slumber parties and everything, today it's a whole different world. You could get a
Oh,
different
yes.
child back the next day.
Yes, it is.
Maybe something they saw on TV or a video, or something they shared in a risky environment
Mhm.
where kids will do all kinds of things. And one of the things that seems so innocuous
Yeah.
is huffing or inhalant misuse.
Right, right.
And I was reading, it was a popular magazine. I can't think which one it was. I was reading, the author was the mom of like a 13-year-old, and she was writing a humorous article about raising a 13-year-old. And she laughingly recalled that her son was having a party, having all his friends over, and they were in another room. And she went in to take in some snacks, and she walked in, and they had all been spraying deodorant all over the place, Axe deodorant. That is a known popular inhalant misuse product.
Wow. I didn't know
And
that.
I wrote to her. She had an email address. I sent her an email. I said, you walked in on huffing,
Yeah.
misusing aerosols. And she wrote back and she says, no, none of those kids would ever do this. But the room was a
Oh
cloud.
my goodness. Yeah.
Even if you didn't intend to
Right.
be huffing, you would still be by being in that
Yeah.
environment.
It's so scary. It's so scary.
It is, but we take the wrapper off.
Right.
And if you do this at an early age, your child is still going to feel safe because you were there with them.
Right.
Your very presence is their filter
Yeah.
for this information. And then you can have those open conversations, because now if your fifth grader comes home and says, you know, what is in these vaping things, and what about vaping marijuana, and isn't marijuana just a plant, and isn't it safe? And as a mom, first thing I would say is, who was telling you this?
Right.
Who were you with?
Right.
I mean, it would be like the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah.
But if you've been to reality tour, you can take a breath
Yeah.
and say, remember what we learned at reality tour, and let's look at this more. Let's see what might be happening here.
Yeah.
I mean, we have had reports back where I remember one child was in sixth grade, went back the day after reality tour at a lunch table and was talking to his friends about the dangers of huffing or misusing inhalants.
Yeah.
And the one child said, my brother does that all the time.
Oh, wow.
So the child went home and told his mother about that conversation. She was able to call that other child's mom,
Mm-hmm.
alert her, plus the school was also alerted
Wow.
to this behavior. So what would that have meant in the life of that one child's brother whose behavior was going to be interrupted?
Yeah.
So we can't be so afraid that we don't tell our kids about the world we have created for them.
Right. Yeah.
It's out there. It happened on our watch.
Yeah.
And our very minimum responsibility is to help them interpret this environment that we have given them.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier that it was almost like a franchise, and I saw online that y'all are in multiple states. Is that a goal that you have, is to be, or are these people that reached out and wanted to do this program in their state?
Well, we we used to have the advantage of the federal government had a website under SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Association. They had a website, and you would apply as an evidence-based program for them to look at you and deem if you were worthy enough to be listed on their website of prevention programs.
Yeah.
And so some people in other states began to discover us that way and look into us through our website and connect with us. During the last administration, that shopping list for programs was taken down and not replaced
Yeah.
by anything.
Mm.
So our job now is to, this is for any community. It can be a metro community, it can be suburban, it can be rural. It can work anywhere that 12 people who care
Right.
want it to work.
Yeah.
We even have what we call a gap grant, because we have to charge for our program model, and we have to ensure fidelity to it. The cost is $3,500.
Okay.
But that includes the training for your presenters, which normally cost $1,000. And if a presenter moves on, other programs charge you another $1,000 to train someone.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Our training is all on video. So that $3,500 was arrived at by our board of directors as to be just at the threshold where you have to use it if you buy it.
Right. Right.
And we do have what we call a gap grant. Let's say a community has a stakeholder meeting, 12 people come together from the different sectors of the community, and we have a free guide to download to show how to pull those sectors together. Just plug in the coffee pot, talk about this program. That's your first step. It's really no obligation.
Right.
We give you all the materials, but this isn't a free guide that you download. So moving on from there, if you can't raise that $3,500, let's say, we can get to 2,000, but I don't see where we're going to get this 1,500. But you've already done the organizational part of it by having stakeholders say they want it.
Right.
Then we'll forgive that extra $1,500. We want you to have this program.
Right. That's the point. Yeah. Well, I thank you for what you're doing, because I personally, drugs have not affected, my family directly, but I do have friends who have had kids. I know one who ended his life because he was in and out of rehab. He was in and out of prison. He just couldn't get past it. And I know people who this affects in a very, very big way. And so I think that what you're doing as a preventative program is so wonderful. And I know it's effective and very powerful. I am excited to share what you're doing with people.
Awesome. We do have that factor, which is important in today's culture, is people who do step forward don't want to step back. you can see that and feel the palpable change
Yeah.
in the room
Yeah.
as parents get this message, and then their children are looking to them to protect them.
Yeah.
And, we had one dad arrive right after soccer practice. His wife said, take Johnny to reality tour, be there at 6. He had no idea what he's in for.
Oh my goodness.
His first question was, how long does this last? And when he was told it's 2 hours, his shoulders kind of sank. He came up to the director after the program and said, these may have been the most important hours I ever spend with my son.
Wow.
So parents don't know even some of the basic, and we consider it basic because we're in the field,
Right.
but the amount of information that parents are missing.
Oh yeah. You mentioned multiple things that I had never heard of or would never have thought of. So, and that's what I love that the coping skills, the program continues to change, because I'm sure everything in the world is changing. I'm sure the drugs are changing and the methods that they're using are changing. I'm sure it is. So I think that's awesome that y'all, update that repeatedly.
Yes, yes. The
Yes.
problem with being so innovative, though, is that it's very hard to say we're like anything else, because we're
Right.
not.
Right.
Forget the 30-second elevator speech.
Yeah.
So marketing becomes extremely difficult. And as
Yeah.
you look at our website, and even for those of you listening to this podcast, our website is realitytour.org. But if you are confused by anything or think we could be doing a better job, let me know, because this is the only way we have to reach those other states and
Right.
reach across the United States.
Yeah.
One thing I should mention is that a couple of organizations have really been powerful in this endeavor, and that is Lions clubs and Rotary clubs,
Okay.
who, when they find out about how this program is structured, often want to be the sponsor and
Yeah.
help get it set up and organized and see that it continues. And, I've often envisioned if something like Rotary International would say, this is our project across the United States.
Yeah.
We could have drug prevention in small communities, large communities,
Wow.
and it would be enduring prevention.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away, because when you think about it, in your own community, do you have any prevention programs that are always on the calendar for families?
Right.
And shouldn't we have that on every community calendar?
Yeah.
That there's something coming up, so that parent who needs a teachable moment has a resource.
Love it. I love what you're doing. I'm so thankful I was able to talk to you and learn about it. I hope that people will hear this and want to get involved, want to have it in their state as well. So,
well, thank you for what you're doing and sharing people's hard work, and in so many different ways. And I wish you luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
I am every state.
Yeah.
And I'm pleased to represent Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Really
yes.
Thrilled.
I'm so thankful when people say yes. I get so excited. So I appreciate it. I hope your cough gets better pretty soon. I know that's frustrating.
It is, but onward and upward.
Onward and upward. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. I hope you have a great day.
Okay, you too. Nice meeting you. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Alrighty, bye-bye.